So how did the candidates fare in night 2 of the debate? The Supreme Court rulings on gerrymandering and the census, and the House caves on the border bill.
Here for an in-depth discussion on all of this is the Hill's Editor-in-Chief. Cusack has come back. Welcome, Bob, to the Rising
Happy
Show.
Friday. It has been quite a weekend.
You can tell it's rising.
Yeah,
You know it's Friday. We're all like a little loopy here.
Yeah, but an incredible news week.
Okay, so
incredible.
So Bob, top line takeaways from last night.
I was listening to your analysis. Listen,
Yeah.
I think you guys were dead on. I think Harris had a great night. She went after Biden, and that's risky because we've seen people go after someone named Donald Trump, and then the counterpunch is actually stronger. Biden's counterpunches were weak. And this thing is certainly going to tighten up. We've got a long way to go. We obviously have another debate next month, and then basically a debate per month. They take August off. So Biden can come back, but he wasn't sharp. That's a problem.
He did have a good line, though, last night in his initial comeback. He said to her, you know, when this was all happening, after Dr. King was killed and cities were on fire, I became a defense attorney, not a prosecutor.
Yes, that was good. It was just the follow-up, and it kind of got lost because Harris kept going after him, and listen, and I think she needed a standout performance because her campaign had been okay, it had been kind of neutral. Warren had been moving up, so this was big. I think Buttigieg did very well. I think he was frank about his mistakes as mayor, and I think that works with voters. So this thing is going to get very interesting over this summer.
What would have happened if Joe Biden had actually come out strong against Harris? Do you think he really would have solidified himself going into the next debate?
I think so. I mean, I've talked to some Democrats. I'm sure you've talked to them as well. That if Biden could hold his lead for the next couple of months, he had this thing.
But that's exactly the problem with their strategy.
Right.
That's exactly the problem.
Totally agree.
Hold your lead for 9 months is not a way to win the White House.
You don't win football games by playing a prevent defense, and you got to go for it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You have to go for it. Obama went for it. You have to be bold. Trump went for it. Hillary was safe in 2016. So you can't be safe and win the presidency. Period.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we also looked at do you think that Senator Elizabeth Warren really drew a short straw by not being able to get on that debate stage?
In some ways, yes. I mean, certainly Harris is going to be the story going into the July 4th. So some of her thunder, and she did well in the debate. Obviously, she really needs to, I think, be on the main stage, and she wasn't on the main stage. It was luck of the draw, but I do think that she's moving. She's moving up. Bernie Sanders was kind of Bernie last night. Not bad, not great. He needed a better night, I thought.
Yeah, I think if you look at this as sort of like a Sweet 16 bracket. Elizabeth Warren at least had the benefit of owning her bracket. Right?
Yes,
like she won her part of the tournament, which then I think when you see them all on stage, I mean, people are spoiling for the night when you get Bernie and Biden and Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and maybe Cory Booker, people to judge all on the same stage, and then let's see what happens when we've seen all the winners from their respective, parts of the electorate come together.
Well, and the problem for Biden is that in a Democratic nomination, if you win the African American vote, you win. You win the nomination.
Yes.
And Biden has been very strong, and that is probably gonna weaken in the coming weeks after his performance. So Harris, I think, made a big play. She has the momentum. But you know how this thing can change.
All
it's
eyes,
going to be topsy-turvy.
All eyes on those poll numbers. I do want to. I was talking about this earlier about the immigration and healthcare nexus.
Yes.
That really stood out to me as such a massive sea change moment. Do you think that's going to hurt electability chances, or is everybody? But I thought it was notable that Joe Biden gave himself a huge door open when he was like, "Those people should not be the focus of deportation."
Yes.
He didn't say they shouldn't be deported.
Yes.
But he said they should still be eligible.
Oh, the party has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, the party has moved left. I mean, Green New Deal, Medicare for all. Those things are not passing the House. They don't even have the votes to pass the Democratic House, but the presidential candidate. So I do think that's going to be a problem in the general election. But this is how it goes. They move left in the primary, and then whoever wins is going to have to move. But when you say these things, it could hurt you with independence.
Well, you know what else could hurt? I mean, you tell me. Kamala Harris is developing a pattern that could be troubling of saying something that's pretty far out and then in the minutes or hours after, walking that back a little bit. She did it again last night.
Yeah, and she did it again this morning about getting rid of private insurance.
Yes.
She said, she misheard the question, and that's why she raised her hand. So yeah, no, that's a problem. But at the same time,
Trump will drive a truck through that hole.
No, that's right.
You know, in a general election, Trump will be all over that.
But when you listen to people interview Harris, and we all do it, we try to try to get headlines and trying to kind of put words in their mouth. She doesn't allow that. She's like, I wouldn't put it that way. I would put it this way. That is a very smart way of handling the media.
Yeah, she is very good at that. We should also talk about
Lily Adams, her press secretary, communications director, must be happy because we all try to, when I used to do this for a living, you try to train people to do that, but not everybody can do it. She does it well.
She does it very well.
Well, let's also talk about the Supreme Court. We had the big census decisions and the gerrymandering decision. Is that going to be more of a factor going in 2020? Because it does highlight the important role that SCOTUS has. A lot of the candidates talked about that.
Yes. And this was a surprise decision on the census. As you know, conservatives not real happy with John Roberts right now, and it looks like
Matt Schlapp called for him to be impeached.
Yes, I saw that on Twitter.
This is a weird time in America, friends.
Who worked for the Bush administration.
And so I do think this is a huge loss for the Trump administration. I know it's a weird decision too because they're sending it back for a better rationale. But right now, Trump is losing on this. He's delaying the census. The gerrymandering, a lot of people were disappointed because a lot of people say, you think about it, 435 House seats, and how many are swing seats? 40, 50 at most. Zero. So it's a real problem, and both sides agree with this, with democracy, but the court basically dodged it and said, no, we're not going to get involved in this. And there's no way there's going to be a political solution.
One thing, Bob, I was taking a look at was that rationale on kicking the census thing back, that is not good for DACA, right?
Yes.
Because that means that they could look at the DACA rationale and they could kick it back, and DACA won't be solved until the next election in terms of, from a court perspective.
Yes. Though I tell you, it's tricky business predicting what the Supreme Court will do. I thought the Affordable Care Act would get thrown out the first time around.
Right. And I'm old enough to remember when the Supreme Court gave that decision in Gore v. Bush or Bush v. Gore, and they said at the end, but don't let this will never stand for any other future decision. It is not meant as precedent for anything else. Who makes a decision? And they're like, but you can never use this again.
I mean, well, also the House bill I thought was a pretty big deal as well. Pretty big stark contrast with the Democrats voting pretty overwhelmingly for the Senate approved immigration bill. And then you have the Democratic candidates on the stage couldn't be farther away from where that House bill was.
That's right. I mean, this was a big stare down on the border bill between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and it was a rare situation where Nancy Pelosi lost. I mean, she totally outmaneuvered Trump on the last shutdown. But here, McConnell said, no, I got a bipartisan bill, and it got more than 80 votes in the Senate, and he said, you got to eat it. And she said no. And then the moderates
was
said...
Was it Josh Gottheimer who helped lead that?
Yeah, Democrat from New Jersey, who's from a Trump district. They basically said, no, we're going to take down that House bill. You should vote on the Senate bill. And then you had Patrick Leahy yesterday telling our reporter Alex Bolton, Pelosi should move what we passed. And then hours later, she had to pass that bill.
That is really huge. Why do you think that is? Was it just that the moderate consensus was so big? Because, I mean, you have AOC and the rest of the Progressive Caucus beating down the door, screaming about this decision. She had to know she was going to take a lot of flack for it.
That's right. I think, Sagar, that you look at Republicans had the edge here because remember, Trump had asked for this a while back, and Democrats initially said, no, there's not a crisis at the border. Then they did a U-turn on that. And then you had a bipartisan bill, which is very odd in the Senate. So they had the edge the whole time because Democrats had to change their position repeatedly.
Isn't this how the Senate is supposed to work, though? The Senate is supposed to be the place that calmer heads prevail, people get together, they come up with something that can work. You got a Republican president on one side, a liberal Democrat as a speaker, and the Senate sort of comes out with something that bridges brings the clans together.
And I think it's a learning experience for the Senate because if they operate in this way, they can beat the House. So if they continue to do business like this, they're going to have the advantage because the House, as you know, rarely does anything in a bipartisan fashion.
Can I ask you one question before? So Donald Trump was overseas and he was meeting with Vladimir Putin. At the end of the meeting with Vladimir Putin, he sort of gives an offhanded, don't meddle kind of thing, which seems like he's not taking at least the one part of the Mueller report that doesn't impugn him, just says the Russians did this, all the intelligence agencies have agreed on it. Is there any concern that you detected inside the rest of the bureaucracy, inside the administration, that maybe the president just isn't focused enough on election security going into 2020?
Well, I don't think the president is. I mean, that's been clear. But I interviewed Mike Pompeo, and I said, was Russia going to meddle in the next election? He said, basically, Russia's going to try to meddle in the elections for the next 50 years in the United States. So it's a real problem. I do think when we get to talking about the debates and general election debates, this is one where the Democratic nominee really can go after Trump and say, hey, this is not a funny situation. Your intelligence agencies say they did meddle. So Trump could get, he's exposed there.
He absolutely could. They could easily ridicule him for not being tough enough.
Absolutely.
And it's a big opening that he's given himself for inexplicable reasons. But thanks, Bob. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Next on Rising, we're going to go more in-depth on yesterday's major Supreme Court decisions with the constitutional scholar Kim Wheel.
And she tells us about her book, How to Read the Constitution. She explains why it's more important than ever to understand the Constitution. Maybe they can send one up to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. When Rising continues.